Hello, welcome to another episode for the Service of the King. We're glad you joined us for this episode tonight or today, whenever you get a chance to watch it or do watch it. We're going to be talking about the ministry of reconciliation. We go to 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 16. It says, "Therefore from now on we regard no one according to the flesh, even though we have known Christ according to the flesh, yet now we know him thus no longer." 17th verse. "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. Old things are passed away, and behold, all things become new. Now all things are of God, who has reconciled us to himself through Jesus Christ, and has given us the ministry of reconciliation. That is, that God was in Christ reconciling the world to himself, not imputing their trespasses to them, as has committed to us the word of reconciliation. Now then, we are ambassadors for Christ, as though God were pleading through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, reconcile to God. For he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him." I'm reading out of the New King James Version today. What is Paul really trying to say here in verse 16? He's simply saying we can't evaluate people from the human point of view. The human point of view is not always clear to us. Some of the people in the Corinthian church, they evaluated Paul according to their standards and not according to God's standards. And the only standard to evaluate to is Jesus Christ, not our own set of standards. Jesus is the measuring stick. He's what we have to measure up to. We're not measuring up to man's standards, man's goals, man's ideas of what people should be like. We're measuring up to what Christ has called us to be. And that's the most important thing. We can't be trying to please men and do what they want. We're going to fail most every time. We have to work on pleasing God and measuring up to his standards. In the 17th verse, Paul gives us this promise of a new start. Paul tells us that we become a new creation and that the old has passed away and everything becomes new. This is the transformation process. Our behavior changes, but that does not mean that we're done being tempted with sin or even sinning, because we know that Paul told us that he did things he did not want to do, and he didn't do the things that he knew that he should do. Transformation, folks, is an ongoing process. We are all being made more like him every single day that we're in relationship with him. The next part of Paul's message here is where I wanted to get to, and that's the 18th verse. That all things are of God, or to be more precise, the gift of God was to bring us to Christ, that Jesus Christ reconciles us with God. How important that is. And when we look at this word, when we break down the word reconcile, look up the definition of it. The word reconcile means to restore relations between, to make harmonious, restore harmony to make peaceful, patch up, repair, and smooth out. Jesus brings us to the right relationship with the Father by redeeming us and clearing our account of the sin debt that we all held. That's the great work that's done for us. We then are given the ministry of reconciliation. We're called to bring those that are away from God to Jesus. So my question becomes, why don't more Christians operate in this ministry? What if no one ever told you about Jesus? What if no one ever shared the gospel with you? You see, someone had the ministry of reconciliation to share the gospel with you. Why aren't we, as a church body, more involved in the ministry of reconciliation? I think it's a good question. I think it's an important question for today's church. I think today's church has become lazy in its operation of not being evangelistic and trying to take this message of reconciliation to the world. Paul says we are ambassadors for Christ, as though the Lord is pleading through us. This is our calling. And church, we have to answer the call. If we had a person about to run inside of a burning building, most of us would plead with them, or at least take some kind of action to prevent them from losing their life. Folks, I'm telling you what, people are running towards a burning inferno at an alarming rate today. Where are the ministers of reconciliation at? Where is the church? The world, I'm telling you, the world's answering the call that these people are seeking. Because they're seeking something, anything. And they're offering every kind of substitute that there is. Folks, they have the drugs and alcohol and the sex perversion. They have all of these things. And now we're seeing blatant devil worship being publicly admonished and publicly accepted, really, in our society. Did you happen to catch the Super Bowl show? Or did you catch the Grammys? They're not even trying to hide this anymore. They're very open about what they're trying to accomplish. I can tell you, I didn't watch either one of those, but I did see clips of what was portrayed. The facts are very simple, folks. The flames are getting hotter. And the church of today has become more like the frog in the proverbial boiling water. We may not have noticed it because we're so caught up in our own little world. The church needs to awaken so that it can wake up the world. Instead, the church is having discussions over things that don't really matter. The world is on fire. And the fact of the matter is, the church is sleeping right through the alarm. As ambassadors for Christ, folks, we are the hands and feet of the gospel. The only Jesus that some people will ever see is the Jesus that's in us. The time is past due for the church to get busy in the ministry that we've been called to. We can't sit back on our laurels any longer and just expect people to show up at church. We have to be evangelistic, and we have to be ministers of reconciliation. We have to go out into the highways, the byways. God is sending us. That is our commission. We got to go where people don't expect us to go sometimes, to persuade people to be reconciled to God. The time of doing nothing has certainly got to come to a stop. The world needs to be rescued. And folks, we're the ministers of reconciliation. We're the rescue squad that God has sent out to the world. That's our commission. And if we're not answering the commission, we're not answering the call, we're not being the ambassadors that God has called us to do. Can you tell me what the purpose of the church is then? You see, the church, we're supposed to be training and making disciples so that we can go out and make disciples. Instead, the church has become a sponge where it soaks up but never pours out. We've got to do the work of the ministry that God has called us to do. I know this is a bit of a challenge for some of you to get out of the comfort zone that you're in, but we have to do it. We have to do it. We have to answer the call and do what God's called us to do. God bless. I hope you got a little something out of this, and I hope it challenges you and your faith to become and operate in the ministry that God's called you to operate in, that ministry of reconciliation. God bless. We'll see you next time.